quick.
All righty.
All right.
We good to begin?
I guess so. You're on East Coast time, you said, right?
Yes, I am.
Whereabouts?
Just I'm in a small town outside of Buffalo, just about an hour away.
Okay.
About 6 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah, sun's still up here, but it's still cold. I mean, cold by California standards.
See, we had a 50-degree day today. It's gonna be warm
That's
by New Year's Eve.
warm. Yeah,
I
that's
know.
warm. Actually, I'm kind of in the mountains, northeast of LA, so 50 degrees is not bad for here either.
Good.
Been in the low 40s most of the days.
All right. So
Anyway, enough chit chat.
enough of the weather.
Right.
Now, how did you become involved with Disney's version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame?
I mean, it wasn't through our own doing, Kirk and myself. That's for sure. We were I won't say fresh off of Beauty and the Beast, but we had come off of Beauty and um, God, had we worked on Lion King, or I had worked on Lion King in storyboards, um, just to kind of wind down. I mean, storyboarding for me was way easier than directing, and I got to work with Brenda Chapman, who had been on my crew on Beauty, and she was the head of story on Lion King. So I got to work for her, which was great. Um, and after that, Kirk and myself went into the development department, and we were working on a whole different project. Um, it was kind of an Orpheus and Eurydice project, but undersea with whales and tall-masted ships and things like that. And we had a writer, we had a lyricist and a composer, and Dave Getz was working, in art direction, and it was looking kind of good, but it had some problems. Um, Most notably, how do you have a whale have a conversation with something like a brine shrimp, um, and and keep them both in shot. It just we figured we'd figure it out, but we were working on that, and Kirk and I got a call. It was like a um, an open mic kind of call. We were on mic, and it was Jeffrey Katzenberg who said, "Guys, drop everything. You're gonna be uh, you're gonna be doing something else." And we said, "Well, what?" And he goes, "Just something that's going to change your life. You're going to do Hunchback of Notre Dame." Notre Dame. And um, I guess it had already been pitched to the studio by David Staten, um, in the form of he had had a graphic novel of it and thought this would make a good movie. So he pitched it to the studio, completely unknown to us. The studio said yeah, and because we were not that far off of Beauty and the Beast and hadn't screwed that up, they picked. That was one of the perks of having done Beauty and the Beast was now we were like number one on their list, um, of directors to pick. So they picked us. They said we already got Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz. Um, so so all you got to do is say yes. And so we said yes.
Now, was there a script by this time or any preliminary artwork, or was it just they knew they wanted
There was
to?
no preliminary artwork at that time. There was no, I don't believe there was a script either because Tab Murphy, I think he wrote the initial screenplay, and then Bob Zudiker and Noni White and Irene Mecki and Jonathan Roberts. I mean, they all came aboard at different stages and wrote and rewrote and polished and repolished. But Tab, I believe, wrote the original, and we had just started. There was not a script at this. This was not like Beauty and the Beast, where there was at least something, and there was not much. So yeah, we were kind of we had a book by this Frenchman named Victor Hugo. That was the best we had.
And this might be a extremely asinine question, but I know the story of David Staten pitching uh, the story based on reading a classics illustrated comic book.
Right.
But there were two versions of that comic. One produced in the 40s, which is much looser to Hugo's novel and features a happy ending where Phoebus and Esmeralda are paired romantically, and also has World War II caricatures of Adolf Hitler. And the other one from the 60s is just a straightforward adaptation of Hugo's novel. And my asinine question is, by any chance, do we know which version of the comic book was
Honestly, I don't. I didn't know there was more than one version. Because we didn't read it. We heard that David basically took a graphic novel comic book and pitched that. He his reasoning being this would make a good movie for Disney. I assume it was if he thought it was a good movie for Disney, I assume it was the happy ending one, but I don't know. I like I said, I didn't know there was more than one version. I had thought it was just like a straight telling, just a graphic novel version of Victor Hugo, but I honestly don't know.
another bit of a long shot question. Uh, a guy named Michael F. Beckner, he wrote a screenplay based on Hugo's novel in 1992. Uh, Pretty straightforward telling of the book. And that got sold to Hollywood Pictures, which is a Disney subsidiary,
Mhm.
for a stupid amount of money. And I talked to him a little bit, and he eventually went on to write Cutthroat Island and other such films. And he claimed that his screenplay was bought to be mined for ideas and to prevent competition with the film that you and Kirk Wise directed. Did
Mhm.
you take a look at this screenplay or even know it existed? Or
No idea. Had no idea. This is like on Atlantis when we heard Joss Whedon had when Joss Whedon had screen credit, as a writer for Atlantis, and we was like, we never spoke to the guy. We never saw anything that he wrote. Same with this. I mean, this is the first time hearing of this. I had no idea. And you know, if you're going to ask anybody that question, you ask Tab Murphy. Um, but but no, we had no idea it existed. And to say, oh yeah, we bought it just to stifle the competition.
it's
There
public
were
domain, anyone
already
can do
like
it.
how many remakes were there? There's the Charles Lawton version and the Lon Chaney version, the Anthony Quinn version. I mean, there's a bunch out there already. So it's not like it's not like there was a lack of competition anyway.
Now, this was the first, unless I'm mistaken, your first feature where you started as director along with Wise from beginning to end. In Beauty and the Beast, you kind of came on uh, after there already was a director. How was how different was that as an experience being director from start to end on a film?
I mean, to be fair, on Beauty, it was pretty much start to end because everything that had been done before had been thrown out except the title. Um, we had the characters. We knew, Belle and the Beast and her father and Gaston. So there was like a few pages written, but everything that had been done by the Purdums in London had been tossed out. So we were essentially starting from scratch on that one as well. But this one, yeah, I mean, it was like, okay, here's this book that we based this on, and it's really kind of tragic and depressing and dense, and you're going to make a Disney cartoon out of it. And so we had to. That was the balancing act. We had a source material that we could go to, that had characters, which we changed and tweaked and did our big Hollywood cartoon thing too. But we tried to remain as faithful as we could to it. But I mean, it also goes to like, okay, so what do they look like? We did look at all the previous like movie versions. And I guess there is an animated version or two in there as well, which we didn't look at. But the Charles Lawton one is a classic. The Lon Chaney one, it was also a classic, but we didn't derive as much from that. But like Maureen O'Hara and who was it? Oh God, who was the other Esmeralda with Anthony
You know,
Quinn?
Little Brigda.
Gina Lollobrigida. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so we had a lot. a lot of inspirational stuff to look at. But at the same time, we go, okay, we're doing this for a family audience, which is going to include little kids. So we can't be terrifying, but at the same time, we can't be real cute either. So it was, again, that balancing act. How do you make Quasimodo, who is referred to as the ugliest person in all of Paris, how do you make him appealing? You know, the Beast was different. He could look ferocious, but there was like kind of a teddy bear quality to him that you don't get with Quasimodo. So yeah, so it was like a lot of exploration and a lot of development on every front.
Now, had you seen those earlier film versions or read the novel before coming onto the project? Like, what was your familiarity with the story?
I had seen the Charles Lawton and the Lon Chaney version. I had seen years before, but we rewatched them. I had never seen the Anthony Quinn version. Um, I had read the novel, I believe, in high school, um, and just kind of skimmed over it again. Um, you know, I mean, read most of it again, but there are parts where just like, okay, yeah, 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 where he's like getting into the architectural
Yeah.
detail and all that. It's like, yeah, don't need it, don't need it, don't need it. So, um, yeah, I was familiar with it, um, but not not intimately familiar. I did have to do a refresher.
As director, what were your day-to-day responsibilities? I mean, you're managing this huge team and all these different departments, and
Right.
especially on a scale of
It,
a 80 to $100 million movie. How do you?
right. It depends on what stage of production we're in, because as we move down the production line, the responsibilities changed. Towards the beginning, it was like working with the writers and like sitting in a writer's room and at a table, and okay, so Quasimodo says what, and he does this, and okay, then Esmeralda comes, so we're working out the nuts and bolts of the script. Um, we're working with the storyboard artist, and this is both Kirk and myself, working side by side, working with the storyboard artist, um, and then shooting story reels that with working with the editor, trying to get it up into a story reel that can be approved so that we can take it to the next step. And the next step is, okay, this this story reel, this sequence of Esmeralda singing God Help the Outcast, and Quasimodo seeing her and going up, to the bell tower and blah 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 blah. All that is one sequence, and we're trying to get that in storyboard form with temp music and temp sound effects and temp dialogue and all that, but just to get it in front of the executives so they can approve it, and then we take it to the next step. We give these storyboard sketches, um, and here's where Kirk and I split a bit, because I would take the storyboard sketches to the layout department, which they're like the cinematographers, and they would break it down scene by scene and do the blocking of the characters and the angles and the shots, and do these gorgeous detailed drawings, like pencil drawings of each set and each scene, and then they would like put a couple of drawings of the characters on top of that layout drawing as a guide for the animator. Meanwhile, Kirk is over with the animators, and my background was more special effects and layout. Kirk's was more animation. So Kirk would work with the animators. Um, I should back up. We both recorded the voices as well when we got the script approved, and we went to the voice recording. Both Kirk and I were in the room listening to the actor and going, okay, take two is great. Let's use that. And so
For
that's what the
the
editor,
temp voices, or more
the
for like
real
the actors who
voices,
were cast?
the real
Oh,
voices. Yeah.
still like a
So
story reel point at this point.
um, there was a story reel that existed, and then we would take the actual voices and just drop them in and replace the temp voices. And it was like this constant like work in progress reel. It was this real Frankenstein of a project, because as the storyboards progressed, and you get like a little bit of a little bit of rough animation. You cut the rough animation in, so it's storyboard, animation, storyboard, animation, and then you get more and more animation, less and less storyboards, and then you start to get cleanup animation. You start to get color with special effects, and it just kind of grows and evolves like that. Um, so we would get the actual voices and cut those in. Um, Kirk would take that voice track and the layout drawing with the poses, give those to the animator, and he would work with the animator to get the performance that he wanted out of the animated character. And then from there, once that was approved, it would go to the cleanup department, and the cleanup people would they'd take the rough drawings, the scribbly drawings, and do the one fine, gorgeous line. Then it would come back to special effects and me, and I worked with the effects department, and they would put on shadows or flame or water or smoke or whatever. In 2D, the rule was if it moves but it's not a character, it's effects. So it would come back, rope or a broken glass or anything was effects, and so that came back to me. Then it would go to color, and both Kirk and I would go to color models and watch watch that process and okay it. And we would work with Lisa, our background supervisor, to get the backgrounds. Um, the way, I mean, it wasn't hard because he was like really good, and you just go, okay, good. If she had a problem, she'd ask us, but she was like what Don Hahn liked to call a self cleaning oven. You just like turn her on and let her go, and great stuff comes out. Same with Dave Getz, and both Lisa and Dave would come with us to color models, and we would look at the scene brought up on a monitor, like one frame at a time, and go, okay, this looks good. The smoke, and it's got the underlit, and they've got a rim light on them, and there's the shadows, and we get all the colors, and then it goes to film. Boom. Um, Kirk and I both worked with sound designer and the final editing and the composer and lyricist, the music. And so basically, like the heavy production stuff, the layout, the effects, the animation, the cleanup, that's where we split. And we each kind of trusted each other. We kind of peek over each other's shoulder every so often. But basically, Kirk knew what he was doing, and I knew what I was doing, and we were kind of free to take our teams, and you know we'd meet up again. We'd meet up again later in the editor room.
I've seen some of that preliminary footage. When the movie was put on Laserdisc, they had some of that you could take a look at, just from storyboard to rough animation to pencil tests, and then uh, effects and all these different layers. And it's so interesting to see all that come together. Um, but Hunchback also featured a lot of computer effects.
It
To
did.
what extent were you more involved in that side, or was a lot of the 3D effects like snow, like the crowds and stuff like that, more its own kind of separate island?
We were involved in it, because we had to approve it. It was something that we had to like the look of it, because the snow is like, okay, how much snow is falling? Is it falling? Is it falling just straight down? Is there a little breeze? Is it those big puffy flakes? Is it like that popcorn snow that comes down really hard? I mean, what kind of snow is it? How hard is it snowing? Is there a little bit of diffusion, or do we see like beautiful little snowflake crystals, like in a Christmas special? How's it going to look? So we looked at all of that, and then when it got to the crowds, we were basically using the same technology that they did on Lion King with the wildebeest stampede. The crowd behaviors and the just moving people around. So we had I mean, basically the crowds were men and women, and we would I think it was like four or five excuse me, four or five like versions of a man and a woman. Woman A, woman B, woman C. So we're tall and thin, just kind of you know normal, just like in the middle, bland, kind of short and fat, older, younger, whatever. Same with the men. And then we would kind of paper doll different clothes on them, different hairstyles, different hats, beards, mustaches, whatever, and then go through and color them different. And then the computer, and then you kind of had to ride herd on the computer a little bit, because sometimes the computer, they just like throw it out. And here's a crowd of people, they're all dancing in the Feast of Fools, and you got like three people who are exactly the same right next to each other. No, 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 no. You've got to split those up and change his color and put a different hat on him, bury that one in the crowd. So you had to kind of mix it up a little bit. It wasn't a press and play kind of thing. It was, there was still a fair amount of um, labor intensive work that went into it. Not nearly as much as animating a crowd like that, for sure, but there was still, it was still early days in the computer.
Now, I know Dave Getz was very involved in the look of the film, focusing on the contrast of light and dark and shadow and all that. Was he brought over because you were working with him on Song of the Sea, or was it just a coincidence? Like, was there any crossover between the whale movie and Hunchback?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, we had worked with him on that, and we thought, damn, this guy's great. And um, I think that was part of it. When we were looking around, so who are we going to art direct this? Dave's really good, and I think Don like put in a really good word for him, and didn't take much convincing, for us. So yeah.
This is probably more of a question for the individual writers, but you mentioned how at some point there was a writer's room. Almost, it seems like a thing you'd have on a television set or a production. But I know Tab Murphy wrote the original, I think, first, second draft of the script, and then later on, Irene Mecchi and other people came in. Do you remember what the other writers necessarily added to the film? Because
It was,
I've taken a look at the original story treatment, and it's
yeah.
pretty different. Although you can
um
definitely see the skeleton.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't so much like characterization. It was a little bit, it's like, but it was mostly like dialogue, like how are these people relating to each other? How do we make this dialogue sound natural? And then occasionally it was like, okay, this scene structure isn't working. Can we figure out somewhere else to go with this? So yeah, I mean, it was put up the framework, and there's a fair amount of dialogue in there that's his as well, but also a fair amount of dialogue that we had to like retweak, and like, okay, this scene needs to be shorter, or we got to cut this scene out, we got to punch these two scenes together. How are we going to bridge that? How are we going to, so it was a lot of that kind of thing, a lot of maintenance and upkeep and rewrites, and just punching up and polishing. Did that answer anything?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Um, you mentioned also Brenda Chapman did a lot of storyboard work. I know she did these really beautiful blue pencil storyboards for the Heaven's Light sequence where Quasimodo pines. Uh, and I know that sequence changed a bit from some early screenings, at least based on what you and Wise have said in earlier interviews and in the commentary track for the film. Uh, I think what it's mentioned is a twitch and squirm factor. Little kids were kind of getting distracted during the scene, and that's why it was revised to have more comic gags. Uh, was this the case for any other sequence where it was changed after audience responses? And
I mean, a lot of it, particularly, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about the gargoyle. Did we put them in to lighten the mood, or things like that?
I mean, something like
And
that was there from the beginning, wasn't it?
pretty much, I mean, even in Hugo's novel, he said that Quasimodo talked to the gargoyles, and we just took it the next step and said it's a Disney movie, for Christ's sake, they'll talk back. So yeah, but I think the song, which is weirdly become controversial now, "A Guy Like You," which some people hate, and some people like. I've met people like in their like late 20s, early 30s, that like saw it when they were really little, and thought, I like that scene, so they like it. But other people who are of an age go, this is stupid. He just like ruined the mood, and that was not the point. But we did want to soften the mood. We've just had Frollo and his soldiers like turning the city upside down and burning down mills, and all this horrible stuff. It was like kind of heavy and violent, and we thought we got to lighten it up a little bit. So that's yeah, that did happen there. Um, the battle at the end, I mean, that was honestly, there was kind of an unofficial Disney formula at the time. That when you're having the big fight at the end, and we contributed to this in Beauty and the Beast as well. You have the funny fight, and then you have the serious one, and so that was putting the gargoyles in and bonking the soldiers with bricks and things like that. That was the funny fight, and then it got really serious, with Frollo and the sword.
I mean, even Hugo's novel had plenty of humor in it.
Yeah, until everybody died.
Well, even then, it's a bit mixed in, at least to some extent. But that's a literary
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, were there any concepts which went unused for the film? I know there are, some deleted song sequences and little bits of dialogue and ideas, but is there anything that particularly strikes you as something that might have gone along with development and but was eliminated?
There was a sequence, the abbreviated version now, and it's not necessarily abbreviated. Um, it would have been redundant if we hadn't removed the scene. But the scene with Frollo and Esmeralda on the pyre, when he's confronting her and he's saying, "Choose me or the fire," and she spits at him, that was played in a prison cell the night before, and he came to her in her cell, and it was a much more private and creepy moment. But at the same time, they just kind of did the same thing on the pyre the next day, and we said,
Mm.
pick one. I mean, it's probably plays better here, and we move the story along, um, a little more effectively if we just take that out. As cool as it was, um, that was that was one of the ones that we did end up cutting.
And I don't want to get into any kind of dramatics or anything, but timeline wise, it seems like while Hunchback was being made, uh, there are some issues going on at the executive level at the Disney company, and um, Jeffrey Katzenberg eventually does leave. I know he hired you. He contributed with some ideas with Alan Menken and I have a few other things I've taken down, but he leaves the company in '94 and founds DreamWorks instead. Uh, did these executive shifts and changes impact the film in any way, or did things just
Oh yeah.
keep moving on
Oh
day to
sure.
day?
Oh sure. Um, I mean, the one that I can point to, like the most obvious one, um, was that in character designs, Jeffrey did not like facial hair on characters. He just absolutely hated it. Back on Beauty, we wanted to give Gaston like an Errol Flynn mustache. And it's like, no, 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 no. There's the joke at the end when the beast turns into a human. It's like, couldn't he have a beard? And, you know, it was kind of late in the game to be designing and futzing around with the design. But B, yeah, Jeffrey wouldn't have gone for it. So, I believe it was Stu Nichols that had drawn a bunch of Phoebus design, and some of them had like little beards or full beards or whatever, and of course Jeffrey didn't go for those. He absolutely not. So Phoebus, as originally designed, was clean shaven. Kirk and I always liked the one that is closest to the one in the film now. And when Jeffrey left, God damn, it wasn't more than like 48 hours when we said, "Hey, we can put that beard back on him," and we did. That was, and there were jokes as well that Jeffrey wasn't, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know there were some like Jeffrey doesn't like this kind of humor, but he's gone. So we can do that kind of thing.
And on that same token, Katzenberg leaves, and that same year, he, along with David Geffen and Steven Spielberg, found DreamWorks. And a few people that are on the Hunchback, at least they're are credited on Hunchback. Brenda Chapman strikes me most notably. Uh, go from immediately start working at the company. I mean, Chapman, for example, eventually becomes the director of The Prince of Egypt. Were there any concerns as, I mean, you currently work at DreamWorks, uh, as DreamWorks was being founded in the middle of production, or I guess before a lot of animation began? Any concerns of like brain drain or anything like that? Or
That was dumb. I mean, yeah, taking someone like Brenda, that was a big blow. Um, Steve Hickner went over. Tom Cito went over. I mean, there was a fair amount of people that went over. Randy Cartwright went over. So um, yeah, I mean, it was, and and it was a case of like, man, Jeffrey's just like throwing money at these guys, and he's got this big, pretty studio, and a commissary where the food is free, and all of this, all these perks, and we, we weren't doing that. We weren't offering that, and so yeah, it was kind of a concern. At the same time, we were like, no, we'll be fine, we'll be okay, which was maybe a little bit of like kind of whistling in the dark, but we thought we'd be fine, and we were. But yeah, it was still a shame to see those guys go. When I finally went to DreamWorks myself, my mom asked, like, well, what about all your friends at Disney? And I said, Mom, they're all at DreamWorks now. So
um, there's a 1996 article in the LA Times where there's a brief digression about claiming that there was some concern over the title, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The Hunchback might be an offensive title, and you give the witty remark, what are they going to change it to? The differently abled bell ringer? Uh, was this something that actually happened? A concern over the use of the word hunchback? I know they changed the title in Japan, but
right. I think it did. It was floated, but we didn't think it was ever like serious, like a serious concern. It was like one of those things that come up, that we're like, okay, we got to deal with this. Somebody's got to deal with it somewhere. So um, Disney's got a building full of lawyers. So we'll call them, and release the hounds. And but no, I don't think it was ever like I don't think there was ever like a serious concern that we would have to change it, because it's based on not necessarily the novel, which was Notre Dame du Paris, but certainly, um, certainly the versions that had come before that were in the public kind of consciousness. So we didn't think we'd have a problem with that. What we didn't know, at that time, we were using the word gypsy right and left, and that was not something that, I mean, honestly, we were not aware that was it wasn't the thing then. It wasn't brought up. It was never mentioned, and we never knew until 20 years later. They said that's offensive. You know, uh, Mea culpa, but we didn't know.
right, let's see here. From the research I've done and people I've talked to and interviews I've looked at, it seems like the team at Hunchback had a relative degree of creative freedom. Uh, you knew your parameters of what was acceptable, was not acceptable for the most part, and you're able to effectively do what you wanted within that those restrictions. I mean, is that a fair characterization? Would you say, or
We probably, I mean, I would say we had more freedom on that production than we had on Beauty, where we were micromanaged a lot. Partly because it was Kirk and my first time. We had never directed before. It was a big deal for the studio, but also because Jeffrey likes to control things, and he likes to ride herd. He's very particular, and he was gone. And so and there were other, you mentioned other kind of political machinations at the studio, and that took up a lot of executive, brain space at that time. So yeah, we had our parameters, and as long as we didn't like, run off the rails, they were pretty happy with like letting us do our thing while they did theirs. We were still checked up upon, and we were still, we still had, Tom Schumacher and Peter Schneider, and those, they were still on us quite a bit, but even they had like pulled back a bit, and we noticed a marked difference, particularly in Peter Schneider, between Hunchback and Beauty, where he was on us every week. We had meetings that were just, they were just torturous to go through, because he was just like on us, just like hammering us, and he was much more relaxed and trusting on Hunchback. So yeah, there was a difference.
And once things finally wrapped up and the film was released in June of '96, there's a huge marketing blitz, an unbelievably expensive parade in the city of New Orleans. I found the numbers for that, and I just kind
Thank
of,
God I never saw those numbers. Yeah,
it's you spent that much money to show a movie to a couple people
in
one
the
time, and
Superdome. Yeah, in the Superdome.
but what did you? How do you feel about the film's publicity? It had that very upbeat party marketing scheme.
Well, I mean, that's why we got a lot of, shit from the public, was because they felt like we had lied to them, that we had deceived them. That it was, I believe, the company's feeling at the time that, we had to basically market a Disney cartoon rather than, a new kind of Disney animation. And so rather than suggest, we just did this, you know darker, heavier, animation piece that still fits within, the Disney family. They wanted to make it all about the Feast of Fools and at the party, and that's only a small slice of the movie. And people, moms with their 4-year-olds came to watch it, and suddenly there's hellfire, and yeah, they felt lied to, and I don't blame them.
I mean, I was born after the film came out, but I would always see like advertisements on videotapes, and I had no idea what the hell this movie was about. I didn't even see it until a few years ago.
Right.
Um, and kind of wrapping up, um, you were listed as a creative consultant on the live action version of Beauty and the Beast. Can you tell me what this role entailed, if anything?
Absolutely nothing. Um, I
Did you
didn't
get
know
paid
that
at
I
least?
didn't know that I had that credit until I was invited to the premiere, at, I guess, the El Capitan Theater. They had the premiere, and I didn't even know I was getting invited to that until Don Hahn, um, told us about it, because he was an executive producer, and evidently he kind of pushed for Kirk and myself to get, a consulting credit. And somebody said, well, yeah, they should, because they used your movie as previs. But no, I never got a word, never a phone call, nothing from that film. Somebody, towards the beginning, said, aren't you excited that Emma Watson's going to be Belle? And I was like, yeah, sure, fine. She's a she's a pretty actress, and she'll make a good Belle. And I'll never get to talk to her. I'll never meet her. But um, so so yeah, we found out when we were at the premiere and the credits were rolling. It's like, son of a bitch, we got credit.
I mean, and I think this answers my next question. Um, I know there was a very early stage attempt to make a live action Hunchback